This is Special Report.
Black holes are one of the strangest things in existence.
Neil Armstrong may have seen extraterrestrials on the moon.
When he spies a discernible shape.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
You can deny all the things I've seen, all the things I've discovered, but not for much longer. Because too many others know what's happening out there. And no one, no government agency has jurisdiction over the truth.
Welcome everybody to Full Spectrum Universe. My name is Rob Yox. We are in for an amazing, an epic, an utterly mind-blowing show this evening. We've got somebody that I've met at Portal To Ascension, and we're growing to have a great friendship. We have, I'm going to bring up the poster for everybody. We've got Reverend Dr. Victor Fuhrman. As you can see, Reiki Master, spiritual coach, podcast host, and producer, as well as a researcher and also an author. And just to give you a little bit of background, Reverend Dr. Victor Fuhrman is an interfaith minister and spiritual counselor. He is the host and producer of two popular podcasts on Times Radio, Destination Unlimited and Vox Novus. He had a day job for more than 42 years in the compressed gas and welding equipment industry in sales management and marketing. As a child, he had a number of paranormal experiences, including being a UFO contactee, seeing deceased family members in spirit, and in the 80s, his spiritual path expanded through yoga, meditation, and a calling to Reiki healing. Through a series of wonderful synchronicities, he enrolled in a New York seminary in 1995 and graduated and was ordained in 1997. This led to his dual role of business by day and spiritual service by night. He was a spiritual conduit for the Paranormal NYC, as well as other teams in the New York area. He is married to author Reverend Lori Sue Brockway, also a graduate of the New York Seminary, and lived in Queens, New York. So without further ado, Victor, how are you, my friend?
Wonderful, Rob. Thank you so much for inviting you to join you tonight. Inviting me to join you. It's rare that I'm on this side of the microphone. Usually I'm on the other side, on your side of the microphone. So it's a pleasure.
When we did Portal to Ascension, I felt such a connection to you, and with your poetry and what you were saying, it felt like we were very much on the same wavelength. And I love to bring people onto the show that are on the same wavelength, because we usually we have these consciousness-based and spirituality-based conversations that enhance those around us. And the things that your background and all of the different things that you have experienced as well makes you a plethora of information when it comes to consciousness, contact, spirituality, ministry, religion, and just everything. So it's a real pleasure for me, because now I get to pick your brain and ask you about all of those different experiences and how you express them daily and how it impacts your life on a daily basis. So tell us exactly, before we get to that, I forgot, we already have, this is in the comment section, or the description section of this show, we put your show links in so people can go directly to it, and that's for Times Radio, and then there's also Times Magazine. So we're going to get to that shortly. I just wanted to do a quick promotion for them, but tell us how you really started to envelop this lifestyle of the consciousness or the spirituality.
I guess it has to start when I'm a kid. When I was a kid, I was born in 1953. Grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and I had a sense, even back then. I think the earliest I can remember is 4 or 5 years old. A sense that everything in our 3D reality was just part of it, that there was greater things, that there was more to it. And I think I had my first conscious contact experience when I was 5 years old. And what I would share with my mother and father was that I went to night school, that my teachers would come and would give me night school. And as a 5-year-old, that would have been 1958, most of the kids my age wanted toy trucks and sporting gear and things of that nature. There was a big thing about wearing a cowboy hat and cowboy holster and pistols back then with kids. I didn't want any of that. I wanted parts to make radios, to build crystal radios originally, and then tube radios, and then ultimately solid state transistorized things. And I was blessed with a very, very wonderful spiritual grandfather, and who would share things with me when I was a kid that did not resonate as things that you would share with a kid. It was something that he thought, you would say to a fellow adult, someone who had a sense of what you were talking about. And I was very close to him. And one day when I was 7 years old, I was sitting in my room reading something, and I looked up, and my grandfather was standing there. And I said, "Grandpa, where did you come from?" And there was nothing said, just a smile. And then he dissolved. And I went into the living room and I said to my parents, "Grandpa was here." He said, "You're imagining things again." And a few moments later, the call came that he had transitioned, that he had passed away. So that was my first conscious experience of the fact that the essence of what we are, the soul, the spirit, is something that is not just linked to the human form that we happen to inhabit when we're in a lifetime. Another thing that happened when I was in first grade, which would have been 1959, there was a book in the classroom library entitled "You Will Go to the Moon." And I said to the teacher, "Can I take that book home?" And she said, "Yes." And a couple of weeks went by and she said, "You have to bring the book back so other kids can read it." And I said, "I can't bring that book back." And she said, "Why?" I said, "Because it's wrong." And she said, "What do you mean it's wrong?" I said, "It's wrong. I've been there. It's wrong." Of course, my parents were called, a counselor was brought in, and again, I was chalked up as a kid with an overactive imagination until something resolves that later in life, and I'll explain that later. So I had all these experiences as a kid, and you would think that that would have been something that would have led me to pursue all of that, but my life ensued, went to school, did all the things that you normally do growing up, did jobs, went to high school, started college. And in those days, I won the only lottery I've ever won in my entire life. That was called the draft lottery. So I had a number of choices. A few friends would go off to Canada, leave the country. Some would just evade or something like that. And somebody said to me, that you should go to an alternate branch of service, and that rather than into the Army at that time. And you'll have a better chance of, number one, surviving your time in service and not having to worry about going to Vietnam, which was the concern at the time. And I had been a pre-med student. I wanted to be a doctor, and I went to a recruiter, and I said, "If I sign up for the Air Force, will they train me to be a doctor?" He said, "Absolutely, sign on the line." And being the naive person I was at the time, I did. Arrived at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas, where they sat us down and gave us a series of aptitude tests. And of the 50 people that were in that original group that I was in, they called 5 of us in for special talks and said, "You guys were the highest scoring on these various types of exams that we gave you. Here's your choices of what you can do in the Air Force." And I said, "But I thought I was going to be pre-med or medical training, a medic of some kind." He says, "No, we don't need that right now. Here's what we need." And they gave me a few choices. And one of them was to go to the Presidio in Monterey, California, and study the Russian language, and then be stationed on a mountain in Turkey, intercepting Russian transmissions and translating them. I said, "Nah, no thanks." Another one was called Crypto School. I said, "What's Crypto School?" You go to a bunker in Montana or in one of these places, and you sit there and you hold the key that turns on the launch mechanism for an atomic weapon. I said, no, I'm not interested.
Nope.
Not for me. And then the last thing they gave me was a chance to go out to Lowry Field in Denver, Colorado for logistics training. And at the time, the Air Force had a computer system that was, by today's standards, would be considered an antique. But that's what they trained us on. And While out in Denver, I had another contact experience. A group of us rented a car for the weekend to go up to the mountains. And while we were on the mountains, something passed overhead. Our car stalled out. And a few minutes later, a couple of choppers were flying after it. And then the car was able to restart and we were able to get on our way. So that was another experience. I don't remember specifically contact, but that was a sighting at that time. In any event, wound up at Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland, where the presidential fleet is located. And in that system, and I was doing my thing, and I was serving my country and enjoying it. And but there was something that was missing. And one of the things that I had done in college was I was on college radio, and there was a thing published in the base newspaper said the Air Force needs broadcasters. So I recorded a tape. It was tape in those days, reel-to-reel tape. Sent the tape in, got an acceptance, was taken out to Fort Benjamin Harrison in Indianapolis, Indiana, and went to what they called the Defense Information School, where they trained us to be broadcasters or military journalists, various types of that type of thing. And my first duty assignment was Korea. So January of 1975, I was in Seoul, Korea, and I was doing what they called the American Forces Korea Network, originally radio and then television, and doing news anchoring, basically, and doing news broadcasting, which I really enjoyed doing. I had a lot of fun doing that. While I was over there, I had a problem with my back, and a friend suggested, why don't you try acupuncture? And I said, okay, that sounded something. I'd heard about it. I'd never experienced it. Back in those days, that was not something that was common knowledge, at least here in the United States. But, you hear the word acupuncture. Anyway, went to an acupuncturist, and unbeknownst to me in those days, two things. Number one, they did not use disposable or highly sterilized needles. Number two, hepatitis B was endemic in Korea, which means many people carried hepatitis B. Didn't have this illness, but they were carriers. A couple of weeks after the acupuncture treatment, I started losing my appetite. And one morning I woke up and I looked in the mirror and I was starting to turn yellow, and my eyes were starting to turn yellow. And I went to the base hospital, which was actually the lineage of the 407 7th MASH unit. So if anyone ever watched MASH, the hospital I went to was basically the inheritor of that tradition. And they looked at me and said, you've got hepatitis. So they admitted me, and I'd lost a lot of weight and was getting sicker and sicker. And they sort of separated me from the rest of the people that were in that same ward. And one day the doctor came and said, do you have a will? And I said, no. And they said, well, we're going to send a judge advocate general person over to have a will for you, to prepare a will. And I said, why? He says, well, just in case you're not doing well, we want to protect your family, we want to protect everything. And they actually had sent a telegram through the Red Cross to my mother back here in New York, basically saying that I was on the very seriously ill list, the VSI list, which is basically the critical condition list, that my prognosis was not good, and that they would keep in touch. And my mother passed a couple of years ago, but I have the telegram. Anyway, one day I had a voice in my head say, ask the doctor for an anatomy book. And I said, why? Ask the doctor for an anatomy book. So I said, okay. So I asked the doctor for an anatomy book. He said, why? I said, I don't know, just can I see an anatomy book? And then I heard the voice say, look at a picture of what a healthy liver looks like. Okay. Opened up the book, found a picture of a liver, meditated on, didn't meditate, studied it. And after a few minutes, I heard the words, put the book down and place your hands over your abdomen. And I did. And I started feeling this wonderful, warm, tingling sensation. Nothing weird, nothing spooky about it, just it felt really good. And at some point, I fell asleep. The next morning at 5 a.m., the nurse woke me up, and she apologized for waking me. She said, we have to take a blood draw. And she took blood. 2 hours later, she came back. She said, I'm really sorry. The laboratory messed up your sample. We have to take another draw. Okay. And then the doctor comes in a little bit later and said, what did you do last night after I gave you that book? And I told him what I did. He says, you're crazy. I said, why? He said, we did not expect you to survive the night. And this morning, the liver enzyme levels in your blood, the indicators, are virtually normal. And we've never seen anything like that before.
Wow. That's
Now,
intense.
you would have thought that that would have been my aha moment and immediately start pursuing a career in spiritual healing, but I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready. There's a Buddhist concept called readiness in time, which means we have to go through a certain number of experiences to prepare us for the next phase of life, the next thing that we're supposed to do, the next challenge that we're supposed to face. In any event, got out of the service. I had applied to a bunch of radio stations up and down the coast, and everybody was willing to hire me, but the salaries in those days, unless you knew someone or had an intro, were very low. I had a wife and child to support. And I put an ad in the Sunday New York Times and said, let my communication skills enhance your business. I got a call from a guy on a Monday, an interview on a Tuesday. He hired me on Wednesday. And that was the beginning of my 42-year career in the compressed gas and welding supply industry, something I had no knowledge of, but I was a quick learner. I learned the business. I learned every aspect of it, did very well in the business. In the mid-90s, I started, I'm sorry, in the mid to late 80s, I again was having problems with my back, and the friend said, why don't you take yoga classes? They'll be very helpful for your back. I said, okay. I found a newspaper for adult education at a local high school, and it said, take yoga classes with Judy Hamsa. And there was something about her name that resonated with me, and I said, great. And I signed up for the class, and I met Judy, who became my yoga teacher and also a very good friend. And she said, I love your voice. Would you start facilitating guided meditation? And I said, sure, of course. I started leading meditations. And then we started taking a series of trips, weekend trips, retreats to a Zen monastery in Livingston Manor, New York, where we would do yoga and meditation and all these wonderful things. And at one of these retreats, someone mentioned the word Reiki. Now, I'd never consciously heard the word Reiki in my life, but something about it called to me, as it did to my friend, my teacher, and one other person. And that was something, that was October of that year. They said, that's something we'll look at next year. Well, 2 weeks later, we were in our first Reiki class together, because once you say yes, there's no turning back. And the Reiki became a spiritual accelerant for me. That really was the key that reopened. That was the rocket fuel that reopened everything for me. All the things that happened when I was a kid, the experiences that I had, that healing, that miracle healing that I had. And after the first day of Reiki, the Reiki teacher had given us an assignment during the class to enfold our hands into our chest, into the heart area like this, close our eyes, and see whatever came up into our field of vision internally. And as soon as I closed my eyes, I saw an angel. I didn't have any kind of correspondence with angels or any type of really interest in angels before that happened. And I said, I see an angel. And the teacher said, ask the angel its name. And immediately I heard Gabriel. Okay, Gabriel. Didn't really resonate with the, it sounded very, very intriguing and a wonderful insight, but what was this about? That night I went home, and my daughter, who was 10 or 11 at the time, I said, do you want to experience what this Reiki feels like? She said, okay. And she sat in the chair, I put my hands over her head, and she closed her eyes. She said, Daddy, she said, I see. And she started naming all of these members of her family who were deceased. My father and grandfather and all these people. And she started mentioning them, and she had never met any of them, but she saw pictures of them. She said, Daddy, there's an angel flying above the family. I said, what's the angel's name? And she said, Gabriel. So that was an indication to me. And Gabriel, being the spiritual communicator, the enunciator, the voice, that planted a seed. In any event, in the mid-90s, my first marriage had ended for spiritual reasons. My spirituality was expanding and my ex was contracting. And through a friend of mine, I met a woman who said she was interested in Reiki. He had introduced me to her, saying that she was dealing with breast cancer and she wanted to find out more about spiritual healing and Reiki and so on, and all the things that I was doing. And I called her up and made an appointment to see her on a Sunday morning, and got to her home, and she opened the door and she looked at me and I looked at her, and we literally said, it's you. We'd traveled together before. And a relationship ensued, which was a healing and growth relationship on so many different levels. I can't even begin to talk about it. There's just so many things involved. But one of the things that was happening in those days was that if you wanted to go into a hospital and do any type of laying on of hands, be it Reiki or if it was part of your spiritual practice, you had to either be a licensed massage therapist or ordained in a faith where laying on of hands was considered to be a sacrament. Obviously, having a full-time job, I could not take 3 years off and go to massage school. But this wonderful woman that I met and fell in love with, her name was Judy, and she said, you know, there's this place called the New Seminary of New York, which is the first interfaith seminary in the United States, which trains interfaith ministers in every facet of virtually every religion. It was founded by a rabbi by the name of Joseph Gelberman. She said, we should definitely go down there. You should sign up for this. This is something for this. I know this is right for you. And when she said that, it resonated with me. And I went down and I met him and I signed up, and he said, she has to sign up with you. You have to come together. There's a higher purpose at work. The two of you have to be ordained together. So we went to the school and we were trained in all these wonderful aspects of interfaith ministry. And a couple of the things that he shared really resonated with me, and his teachings stick with me to this day. One of them was that there should be an 11th commandment. Everybody knows the 10 commandments. There's actually 600 and something, 618 commandments. He says there's an 11th commandment. The 11th commandment should be, thou shalt have purpose. Thou shalt have purpose. You know, you think about the things that you do in life, and sometimes you question why you do them. But when you step back and look at them, you realize that there's a purpose. And if you act in life, no matter what your career, no matter what you're called to do, if you see it as your purpose, it's a totally different experience. So that's one thing that I embraced immediately. The other thing that he taught was an ancient Hebrew expression, hakol beseda. Now, the literal translation is everything is in order. You say to someone, how's life? Hakol beseda. It is what it is. Everything is the way it's supposed to be. He says, no. He says it means everything is unfolding in divine order. He said we may not see it, we may not recognize it, but there is a higher purpose in everything that's happening in your life when you open up your, what he called spiritual eyes, and see it with your spiritual eyes. It so resonated with me because it immediately triggered a memory. I had enrolled in the school in 95. In 92, I think it was, I had read James Redfield's Celestine Prophecy. And I said, if you take away the adventure story that he has in there and take the basic story of the insights, these series of events which lead you to lessons that move you forward on a path, that's my life. That's exactly how my life was unfolding up to that point. And I really resonate. But anyway, when he taught that thing in 95, I said, that's the story. That's what it is about. Carl Jung coined the term synchronicity, meaning meaningful coincidences without any type of causal connection. There's no such thing as a coincidence. Everything that happens, again, is part of that plan, that Hakol Beseder. The word Beseder is from the, uses the word Seder as in the Passover Seder, which means in order. It's an order of things. And so I so resonated with that teaching, and it really moved me forward. In any event, the time with Judy was wonderful. We went traveling to places that I had never been before. We went to Sedona, Arizona, a couple of times, where a place that she loved, and I so resonated. I recognized it as some place that I had been in a previous lifetime. Went to the Grand Canyon together. We went to California. We did a lot of traveling together. And we were supposed to be ordained and graduated in the fall of 1997. And earlier that year, she was starting to get ill. The cancer had returned, and she was starting to get ill. And her strength was weakening, but she was determined to graduate with me and be part of that whole wonderful, wonderful organization. And on the day of our ordination and graduation, I was the president of my class. And I addressed this huge crowd at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in Manhattan, which is where our ordination and graduation took place. And I spent most of the speech honoring this woman, Judy, saying what an amazing woman. She had been a special education teacher in Harlem. She had hundreds of kids who called her mom, who she gave wonderful inspiration to go out and be anything they chose to be. And majority of her kids went on to college. Many of them became professionals in various careers, and just she inspired that in them. She was just so wonderful. And I shared about her voyage, her journey with cancer, and how brave she was and undaunted by the experience. And that was our ordination and graduation. And the next week, we were preparing for a Thanksgiving dinner, and she collapsed and went into a coma. And we rushed her to the hospital. And the doctors basically said, she's had a good run, but this is it. And they gave me an option of taking her home on home hospice, which I did. And December 25th, Christmas morning of that year, 1997, she came out of the coma. She woke up. She said, "What day is this?" And I said, "It's Christmas. Merry Christmas." And she said, "I want you to kill me." I said, No, I can't do that. She says, I said, "Why? Are you in pain? Are you suffering?" She says, "No, I don't want you to be suffering." This is the kind of woman she was. And I said, "That decision is between you and your creator and your God. When you're ready, when he's ready, where she's ready, when it's ready, it'll be your time." And she smiled, and I gave her a kiss on her forehead, and she went back into the coma. The next 2 weeks, a week and a half afterwards, it was January 6th or 7th, and the doctor, we had her on IV feeding, and the doctor said, "It's time to take her off. It's not going to, she's just going to start choking, and then, she's going to pass, and you better disconnect her from the IV and just let it happen naturally." And it was up to me to do it. I was trained by the hospice people how to do this, and I disconnected the IV. I gave her Reiki. I prayed. The next day, I realized that if she did pass, I didn't have a suit for a funeral, and I went out to get a suit. And the voice in my head again said, "Go back home. It's time to go back home," before I got to the clothing store. And when I walked in the door, she had taken her last breath, and she transitioned. And I can't tell you the blessing that relationship, she was the one who taught me how to love fully. She was the one who opened my heart in ways that I had never had it open before. And the lessons that we had to learn together, her lesson was that she was loved and that she was worthy of that love. And my lesson was to truly learn how to love. And that was the gift that she had given me.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank
She
you.
passed.
Thank you.
Incredible story, though. I mean, it's just
So
there's
I'm
moments
sorry.
like that. It's interesting to say there's moments like that in life, and we have to be thankful for those moments, especially when we look at the silver linings of what they were, and it's just, go ahead.
The higher purpose, we don't see it as a higher purpose when we lose someone we love, but ultimately there is something. And so going back to this weird story of synchronicity and this wonderful stuff. So the seminary had asked me to come back and be one of the deans and to do recording of the services and all kinds of classes and all kinds of good stuff. And this woman kept looking at me and smiling at me every time she would come to these gatherings and the classes and the festivities that the organization sponsored. And I said to someone, "Who's that woman that keeps smiling at me?" So that's Lori Sue Brockway. And I said, she's a student in the school, obviously. I said, "What did she do before?" She was the editor-in-chief of Playgirl magazine. I said, "Wait a minute." I said, "She's not looking at me." I said, I'm not Mr. January." I said,
Right.
Little did I know that she was attending the graduation ordination service the day that me and my Judy graduated. And she heard me sharing these words about this woman. And she said, "Where do you find a man who honors a woman the way this man is honoring this woman?" And it planted a seed. A couple of years went by, our friendship ensued, a relationship ensued, we fell in love. And she had, at the time, a 6-year-old son named Alex. Alex was born with one leg and other challenges, but he didn't see any of these things as challenges. He would go on a pair of crutches and a rollerblade faster than most people could run, who were fully bodied, could run. And he used to hang with me when she would bring him to all these functions in the school, and he and I became friends. And she and I ensued into a relationship, and then I became his stepdad. And I'm so thrilled to say that he turned 30 last October. He works for a radio station in New York as a producer. And I'm really proud of his accomplishments and everything that he's done. And he went to a school out in Long Island called the Henry Viscardi School for Abilities, not disabilities, abilities. And that's what their motto is that they don't look at what your challenge is. They look at how you go beyond that challenge, which is a wonderful and inspiring thing. And he's an amazing kid. Absolutely. And I'm so grateful that I got a chance to be his stepdad and continue to be a part of his life. And Lori Sue and I, the relationship ensued. We would do our day job. She was working as an editor for a couple of websites at the time, and I was doing my day job in the welding industry, as I had mentioned before, welding supply industry. And I was in Billings, Montana at a conference on 9/11. At a conference of the software that was used in the welding and compressed gas industry. And we were getting ready for the conference, pardon me, and I had the television on CNN, and all of a sudden they said, there's a small plane crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center. I said, put on the TV. And as we were watching it together, the second plane hit, and I said, that is not an accident. I said, Alex went to the school in Long Island. I said, you really got to get out of New York now. She lived up the block from the United Nations at the time, which I thought would be, if there was going to be another target, that would be, so she was able to do what she had to do. In any event, she had heard that the Red Cross was looking for volunteer chaplains to work at the Family Assistance Center that was set up on the west side of Manhattan. And I was able to get the first plane out of Billings on that Friday, and then fly back into Newark because all the New York airports were closed. I got back to her apartment in Manhattan that Friday night, and she told me about the Red Cross. And the next day I went, and the two of us signed up as chaplains for the Red Cross. And for the next number of weeks, we worked at what they call the Family Assistance Center that the city had set up on the west side of Manhattan, counseling people who were waiting for word of their missing loved ones. If you recall the pictures of, have you seen my husband? Have you seen my wife? Have you seen my son? Have you seen my daughter? These were plastered all over the city, and they were plastered on the wall in this area. And so we did our day jobs by day, and by night we did this chaplaincy. And it was an amazing number of weeks, and wonderful to be able to offer this gift to our community. I led meditations and did other things to help people get through that energy in that time. So that happened, and then another series of circumstances happened, wonderful circumstances happened. And in 2000, I don't remember the exact year, 2005 or 6, I saw a thing that they were having these gatherings called meetups, where people would get together who had common interests. And one of them was a paranormal meetup. And since I had these experiences throughout my childhood and elsewhere, I decided to attend this paranormal meetup, and I met a fellow by the name of Dom Villela, who was the founder of the New York City Paranormal Meetup, and he also had been the founder of an organization called Paranormal NYC, which was the first paranormal investigation team in New York. And after we became friends very quickly, he said, would you like to join my team? And I said, yes, and I became part of Paranormal NYC, and my role, along with another couple of women who were also mediums, was to actually sense whether or not there was disembodied energy, and then have the conversation and help not hunt ghosts, but help ghosts. And what I learned very quickly was that these bodies are just containers, and the essence of who we are, that spirit, what people call ghosts or souls, should be treated with the same dignity and respect that you would treat someone who is fully embodied as we are. And so the conversation would be, do you know what happened to you? Why are you here? Do you want to move forward? Do you want to move on? And then it was one of my privileges to help spirit crossover. And that was part of what, in fact, I've got a hoodie here somewhere that says, I don't hunt them, I help them. And it shows a picture of a soul ascending through a skylight in the building. So I got involved in the paranormal community, did a lot of that work, did work with other paranormal teams here in the New York City, the tri-state area. And I was actually doing a paranormal podcast a few years ago. and that came to an end. And in 2016, my wife and I were attending a wedding. We were actually officiating a wedding out in New Jersey. And at this wedding were Christopher Buck and Leonie Buck, his wife. They were the editor and publisher of New York Times, of Om Times. I'm a little tired, forgive me, of Om Times. And we were sitting with them and speaking, and they said, "We love your voice. We love your approach to things. Would you like to join us and do a podcast?" And that was the birth of Destination Unlimited, which is the crossroads of science and spirituality. And then a couple of years back, at the height of COVID, I added a second show called Vox Novus, which had to deal with the changing environment and culture that was affected by the pandemic, and other things that are not specifically more on the side of helping people find their way in changing times and uncertain times. And that was the nature of Vox Novus. I've actually been on hiatus from new shows for the last couple of months as I'm in the process of doing a couple of books of my own, and I'm going to be resuming new shows in a couple of weeks. For those who are interested in the old shows, if you go to Om Times Media on YouTube and then look for either Destination Unlimited or Vox Novus, all my old shows are there on YouTube. They're archived there and other places, but YouTube is the easiest place to find them. But I have to backtrack to something else that happened. One of the interesting experiences that I had with the situation of synchronicity and the situation of this all things unfolding in divine order. The day, March of 2020, my coworkers called me in and said, "You know, we're concerned that at your age," I was 65 at the time, 67 at the time, that at your age, you would be exposed to COVID, because most of my work, my day job, was to go out and to meet people in the welding field. Why don't you take an early and leave? And they were very generous to me and very kind to me and so on. That very same day, I got a call from the current executive director of the new seminary. And he said, "We're having an intensive this weekend. Would you like to join us?" I said, "Okay." And I had a wonderful time, shared the experience that I had from my first incarnation with the new seminary back in the 90s. And then he said, "You know, you never finished your doctorate with the seminary. Would you like to do that?" And I said, "Okay." And I finished my doctorate and I became Reverend Doctor. I don't use that title officially when I'm doing work with ministry. Not everybody else calls me Victor any other time, but just to explain that. But that happened. And then February of last year, they decided to bring back what's known as the Interfaith Temple, which had been active until 2013 and had stopped. And I had gotten a call from one of my classmates, Reverend Dr. Stacy Goforth, and she said, "I would like you to be my minister of communication." And I said, absolutely. It so resonated with me. I said, absolutely. And I joined in that organization, participating in Sunday services and doing all kinds of wonderful work that we had done. And we had been hopeful at the time that donations would generate some type of income for us, because we were putting in a lot of hours. Both of us were not really working per se, and we still had bills to pay. And, you know, there's one of the dichotomies in the world of spirit for many people, especially for healers, is the concept that if you give your energy, for whatever the case may be, it's spiritual energy, but there's an exchange that has to take place. You have to be able to also have earnings based upon what you give out. And a lot of healers, I was one of those healers who wasn't wired that way. I would just run around and help everyone, but I also needed to pay the bills. And so consequently, hung it out. I did certified welding inspection work on the side just to generate a little income. And then in January of this year, a friend of mine who had a business that I've known for 40 years said, "I need your help. I need you to come to work for me." And I said, yes. And so I'm now back working almost full time right now. And so consequently, because of that, I could not invest the amount of time I was putting into the Interfaith Temple, and I had to step aside. And step aside with great admiration and thanks, because it gave me again that concept, that 11th commandment, purpose for all that time. So again, synchronicities. One door closes, another door opens, and that's been a continuing evolvement of a story in my life. I met Neil through attending Portal to Ascension gatherings last year. And then he had asked me if I would, or I volunteered to be one, like you do, a host or an MC, and had my first opportunity. And that's how we met. That's how we connected. So again, these doors open, opportunities, you meet people, and
Absolutely.
I'm sorry.
I just wanted to jump in real quick and say it's wild because a lot of your story is like the macro to my micro. I was in Civil Air Patrol, which is an Air Force auxiliary. I learned and got my radio operator's permit, and I was actually set to go into the Air Force and become a radio operator of some sort. They were going to train me to intercept all different types of communique and things like that. So it's pretty wild that, that some of the things line up, and it's just, I could feel it before and Portal to Ascension gave us the ability to talk to each other a little bit. And it's just been, listening to your story, it's like, you see how life does throw curveballs, but like you said, it's all within divine timing, and it gives you that ability to take one step up and move to the next era and move to the next obstacle, and it sharpens you for where you are right now. And you do have a golden voice too. I mean, your voice is incredible. I was listening to your shows and I was like, this is amazing. You have like that I want to say like like in the 70s when you would hear the radio station and it would be like that prime time type of, not DJ, but the guy who would do like the Larry King type of talk show. That's the kind of voice you have, and it's just like, it's amazing. It's amazing. But go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No. So the lesson that I'd like to share with your viewers and listeners is that we are all given these opportunities. These synchronicities are not just for me or for you; they're for everyone. And someone might come to you in your life and present you with an opportunity, and you have free choices with each opportunity. You can either say, no, thanks, not interested. You can say, that's interesting, but I'll put it away for later. Something that's not right now, but I'll do it later. Or you can say, you know what? Yes, that resonates with me. I'm going to move into that opportunity now. And you have to be discerning when you do that, because not everything that you see is what it is, and not everything that you hear. Go with your gut, go with your feeling. And if it feels right, go for it. And every time I've done that in my life, every time I've listened to the inner voice, listened to the guidance, had the experience, whatever it might be, my life has gone to the next step, whatever that next step may be. And at 69 years of age, I can genuinely say I'm not afraid of anything. I'm very content with my life, and I'm grateful for everything. And I think if we can come to a point in life where you can say those three things, you're in good shape.
Totally agree. And, I also, when I started to do these shows, I started in the paranormal field as well. So I've done a lot of different paranormal stuff. And I'm actually in New York too. And I talked to Ron Iacovati and Lord Gonzalez, and they got me into it, and a couple of other people. And, it's just incredible how many things have like lined up. And like I said, yours is like the heavier situations, but mine is like kind of like subtly in the same boat. And it's really wild to see it. But another thing that you blessed us with at Portal to Ascension was some of your poetry. And your poetry is just off the hook. It's like, when Neil does the spoken word and your poetry, I see that as like right on par with each other. And there's this resounding power that comes out of that spoken word when you can relate to something, and then as the poems keep going, you're like, wow, it just makes you think. And I think that that's one of the things that I love the most of any situation that is teaching me, is to make me think. And I hope everybody takes away that kind of mentality, because if we get to this point now, especially in today's society, where everybody's actually critical thinking and doing their research and working towards refining who they are, it'll manifest all around them. And I think that that's something we're kind of diluting from, especially with tech. But then again, there's tech that we're using right now that kind of gives us the ability to spread those messages. So, I mean, it's just really incredible. And your story is amazing. It's amazing, Victor. And a lot of people who have that gift of being able to see entities on the other side, that starts young. It starts young in them, and then eventually some either fades away for a little while or it's prominent. But one of the things I like that you said is that you have to kind of treat them with that respect as well. And they still have all the nuances and idiosyncrasies of me and you. They're just not in physical form, and people don't realize that either. So it's a big, you touched on a lot of great points. A lot of great points.
And I had told you I was going to share a confirmation that came later in life for me. So
Yes.
in January of 2020, my mom was ill, and she had been ill for quite some time, but she turned and she was in a coma. And 2 years prior to that, she was in a nursing home in New Jersey near my sister, and my sister would take care of her there. And I would take her out for lunch and take her to the places that she loved. She loved to eat lobster. She was a lobster fanatic, and so I'd take her to a lobster house in New Jersey, and she would eat her lobster. And at one of these lunches, she asked me, she said, she had Parkinson's disease. She said, "Why do I have Parkinson's disease? No one in our family has ever had Parkinson's disease." I said, "Mom," I said, "you never believed me when I told you my experiences as a kid. But my younger sister, and I have 3 different autoimmune conditions, not life-threatening, not dangerous, but 3 autoimmune conditions. My mother had Parkinson's." I said, "Mom, there are some who have had families who've had experience with contact, who have developed these types of things. But you never believed me." I said, "You never had a strange experience, did you?" And she said, "No, except for that time and the hair in the back of my neck is standing up." She said, "You were about a year old," which would have been somewhere in January of 1954. She said, "I woke up about 3:30 in the morning and you were crying. I got up to make you a bottle. I went into the kitchen. And the next thing I know, this weird light came through the window, and that's the last thing I remember until the next day." She had
Wow.
waited all that time to confirm for me something that I knew had happened and knew had experienced. I said, "Mom, you never had any other strange experience, did you?" She goes, "No, except for that time your father was having surgery and I was in the waiting room. And all of a sudden I was up on the ceiling looking down at myself." She had an out-of-body
I had a body
experience.
experience. That's it.
So all of these things which are in our family, and I know they're in our family, this is not something that my brother or sister would be open about, but I know that we were all involved in this. I know it.
That's incredible. I've had similar situations like that with my family where, I have the ability to somewhat like Reiki. I'm not practice Reiki, but I can use my hands to heal people and transfer of energy and kind of, make sure that I'm not taking on the negative energy that I'm trying to help heal. And I told my mother about that, and she was like, "Well, I think your cousin does the same thing." And I'm like, "Well, I've never told me anything about that." And sure as shit, 2 weeks later, she's there and she's doing the same thing. And the way she does it is she doesn't like I put my hands on the area that hurts. She holds your fingers like this, just holds them. And then she does the same thing. And it's like, wow. And then come to find out, on my father's side, we have Native American in us. And if we go back far enough, though, they were medicine men and medicine women and healers. And it's really wild to see that kind of, I say what's wild a lot, but to see that happen and people come together after it's only been talked about in certain instances, when a lot of people know that I do this type of show, but they don't ever bring it to me until it's like in a different setting. I guess it's strange how it comes to pass that information gets relayed, but it does, and it's really wild.
I say that this is all very natural, not supernatural. The old story is that everything is energy. We know that everything is energy. Intention guides energy, and anything that we apply our intention to, the energy will flow. Now, someone said to me, "You did this work, this wonderful healing work and all this stuff. Why did your Judy die?" And I said, "Because we still have the free will in this incarnation, that once we've learned what we've come here to learn or had the experiences that we've come here to experience, then we can go on." and that it's always for the highest good of the person that you're working with. And you don't know what that highest good might be. So for some, the highest good might be to have a total healing and move on, as I had with my situation when I was in Korea. And for others, the highest good could be to have a few extra years of life or whatever it might be. We don't know that, and that's not our decision. It's the way we give the energy freely without judgment or without putting any type of condition on. And that's really what it's about.
Totally agree with that. And when you're saying that, it reminds me of one of the Wish Alliance creators, Sheila Seppi, where her body, her physical, was breaking down, and she had that walk-in experience, which in turn revigorated her physical being, because now it was time for a different plan to take to be laid out and put forward, because of the new soul that she had that came in, or the new energy that infused into her body. And you're right, it's not on our time. And who's to say when and if we're ready for that transition to move to that next step? And when we do that, who's to say that what's to come in that, or if they need us there? What if we were needed on that fourth and fifth dimensional playing field to turn the tide of something, or to bring a certain perspective or certain energy to light in those realms, to make sure that there remains this balance of free will? Who's to say that we're not that linchpin? And we could go into a lot of the connectivity of that too. And speaking to a lot of people, I truly believe that there is that, like that transition. We are energy. Energy never dissipates. Energy only changes its form, but it never truly goes away. So even the people who, or even the supposed physical people who have been here since the beginning of time, are still here. They're just not in the transitionary stages. They are, transcended stages, I guess we could say.
Absolutely. It's interesting. One of the gifts that I've awakened to is the ability to see auras, to see the energy field, and to see it around people, and to be able to read and interpret it. But I also have clairaudience. I hear, as I shared before, and I feel. I'm clairsentient. I say to my friends, I'm an eclair. I have them all. But I probably ate a couple of too many eclairs.
I love eclairs. You speaking my language right now. Are you kidding me? We'll go down to the delicatessen or the bakery and get a few of them. I'm ready.
But this whole idea, I was teaching a class in 2000 on how people could sense energy, either by touch or by feel, or by hearing, or whatever their clair was, clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient, whatever it might be. There's actually clairolfactance, where people will smell different types of energy, which is really interesting. But during the course of that class, my dear friend Jill Bauman had a 35 millimeter camera, regular film camera back in the day. And I was sitting there, and had my eyes closed. I had my hands like this, and I invited people to come up and sort of feel the energy around me. And Jill took a series of photos. And in one of those pictures, this energy field, I don't know if I shared that with you, this energy field showed up. And it literally looked like this gold light around me. Now, this was done in ambient light. There were no special effects back then. This was not Photoshop. This is right on the negative, the way it is. I don't know if I can pull it up and show it to you. I probably can't. I don't know.
If
I'm not familiar.
If you have, if it's open in the background, you can hit share, and then your share window will come up.
It's not. That's
Or
okay.
you could email it to me, and I can put it up for you.
Yeah, if you'd like to, that's fine.
Yeah.
But based on that, it was fascinating to me. And there was a woman who was actually feeling my energy when she came up, putting her hand over my hand, and she jumped back and she said, I felt an electric shock. So this is all the manifestations of this stuff. So it's not spooky. It's not haunting. It's not it's not the paranormal is the paranormal is a word that always bothered me. It's not supernatural. It's very natural. And all we have to do is be able to recognize it. There was a tone poem by Graham Edge of the Moody Blues many years ago in an album called The Threshold of a Dream, where he says this, I'm sorry, different album, getting old here. He says, this garden universe vibrates complete. For some, there is a sound so sweet. Vibrations reach up and become light, and then through gamma and out of sight. Between the eyes and ears there lie the sounds of color and the light of a sigh. And to hear the sun, what a thing to believe, but it's all around if we could but perceive. And that's the answer. It's energy. It's there. And all we have to do is quiet our minds, get rid of what they call the monkey mind, jumping back and forth between different things, and relax and breathe and experience this wonderful energy, this wonderful communication that's all around us.
You know, I am on board with that, so much so, and it took me a very long time to get that quiet in my mind and being able to sense those energies. And one of the things I like to tell people is it's like when you walk into a room after an argument has started or is just finished and nobody's speaking, but when you walk into that room, you're there. I am. I'm back in action. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes with the modem here, but you know, your physical can perceive on so many different levels and so many different senses that something is happening there. And when you kind of fine tune yourself to be ever present in that sort of awareness moment, it does a great deal to figure out how not how it works, but how it works for you, because everybody could work a little bit different. You know, there's a thousand, a trillion, a million paths to that one road. And that's, you know, everybody says there's a million paths to source, but me and my friend Omar, who's in the audience, watchers talk, we like to say that there's a million paths to that one road, and that one road is the internal. So to
Absolutely.
discover what takes you to that place of internal, it takes a it takes a lot of trial and error. So when that trial and error is happening, it's a lot of it. But quieting the mind is so very difficult for me at first.
You talked about walking into the room. There are so many of my friends and so many people who are what they call empaths, who are sensitive to energy and who don't realize that. And they walk into a situation and they can actually feel. They feel anger. They feel fear. They feel whatever the feeling. It could also be joy. It could be happiness. But they sense it. They physically sense it. And it takes a long time to understand how you're receiving that information and work with it that way. And there's also energy vampires, people who will take your energy from you. You walk in and have a conversation with someone, and you have to sleep for 6 weeks because you're so tired. And you have to learn how to protect yourself from that also.
Yes, and I've had a couple readings, and a lot of the readings that I had, people would tell me that my aura or my energy, when I get or talk to somebody, I envelop their energy, and then when they leave, their energy is stronger for having come in contact with my energy. And I feel like I'm the direct opposite of that energy vampire in the sense of amplification, you know. So and I like to have a good time. I joke a lot. I have a good sense of humor, and I think that laughter is always a great way to kind of break the ice. But I like to research a lot of different things too, and there's so many different programs out there right now, especially with the TV, the internet, that aren't teaching people that sense, that awareness. They want them to be just drone, go, don't think, just act, don't think, just act. And I think that, you know, our communities, especially Portal To Ascension, Watchers Talk, myself, you, we're expanding that awareness to envelop everything, every aspect of life. And when we get into those different areas of study, you know, contact, the paranormal, re-evolution, which is not evolution but re-evolution, because we used to be there and now we're getting back to that point. And I feel that this is that moment in time right now that's really going to change and personify this future that we all see in our heads that we want to come true. But we're right at the, you know, right at that precipice where we have to keep pushing and pushing.
We have to come as a society to the recognition that we are all interrelated. We're all sisters and brothers. We're all part of this human family, and we have to transcend the negativity, transcend this evil that dwells. Evil's a bad word because it really doesn't describe what happens. But when you look at the situation in the Ukraine right now, this is not a new situation. This is something that has happened and happened and happened and happened so many times. And we as humanity have to stand up and advocate the one thing that will stop all this, and that's love. We have to love one another. And we have to respect one another. And what's one of the interesting things about attending the Interfaith Seminary was that we learned that in every faith, literally every faith, there is some iteration of the golden rule. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. Love thy neighbor as thyself. If take away all the other stuff, if everybody just did that, what would we have?
We would be in a much different place right now. And, it's gotten to the point where there is, like you said, a lot of darkness out there, but there's a light to every dark, right? So we have to be that adversary for the darkness. And I have a good friend in the audience, Omar, who has a show called Watchers Talk. We do a lot of events together, and he wants me to ask you about the nothing, the no thing. Where in that state of consciousness or that state of meditation, there is that nothing, and everything comes from that nothing point into for everybody to perceive, but that nothing into something. And Omar, if you want to come into the studio and ask the question better than I have, if that's the case. But he there's this point where everything starts from nothing inside the mind. So what is your understanding of that nothing?
I think that those who can achieve that, some of the great yogis and some of the monks and people who spend their lives in contemplation can come close to that. I don't think for humans in this incarnation, the way we are, that we can absolutely reach that 0 point, because there's always going to be something. And the concept of meditation and mindfulness is what they call mindfulness meditation, is to try and clear away as much of the monkey mind, as much of the noise as we possibly can, and get into that place within ourselves where it's us and our breath and the present moment. And I think that's as close as we can come to 0 point in this incarnation.
I think that if we hit that 0 point, and this is the first time I'm really thinking about this like this, I think if we hit that 0 point, we've transcended to 3D, and we're off into the 5D at that point, because we've shed all the things that would make us, I guess we could say, physically human in that sense, because there's a lot of different processes that are happening to reach that 0 point, and to get to that complete stillness. Your heart would probably stop. Your brain function might stop. I mean, who knows what that 0 point in that field looks like in that sense. I believe that when we meditate, we get super close, but that 0 point would mean that we have transcended this physical and gone to that just pure consciousness, because we would be able to manipulate the world around us at that sort of whim, I think.
I can't remember his name, but there's a guy, I'm losing his name right now, but he actually can stop his breathing, halt his breathing for a period of time in the practice of meditation. I'll send you his name when I remember it. But I don't think we have to get to that point. I think that if we just, again, the greatest lesson we can learn in this life, I think, is to listen. Because I think everything we need to know will be spoken to us if we learn to listen. Very common experience for me. A couple of years ago, I was driving here on the Grand Central Parkway, had my wife and my son in the back seat, and we were in the left-hand lane, traveling at speed limit. It was pretty much moving along, a lot of traffic, but moving along. And I heard a voice that said, "Get out of this lane now." I respond to that voice because I trusted implicitly. I pulled over into the center lane. Within 5 seconds, there was a multiple car accident back in that left lane. We would have been in the middle of that accident. My wife looked at me and she said, "How do you know?" Because I listened. Listen.
It was there. I believe Omar jumped in. Omar, do you want to say what you were asking about the nothing? Did I hit it right, or was I off?
Yeah, you were you were kind of on there, but I was thinking about something totally different. Hello, Dr. Victor. Nice to see you again. I wish I could have been at the conference, but I had some issues and kind of missed it. So it's really nice to see you here. What I meant by nothing is, the zero dimension, the zero state of all that there is. And from that nothing, everything manifests from that. So what manifests from that zero state, if we look at consciousness as an expression of that zero state, a field of information of everything that is, ever was, never will be, streaming through that, and it manifests as the first dimension, which is embedded as a template into all other dimensions. So when we manifest into this reality, into this experience that we're in, right, we are manifested out of nothing, out of that zero state. And even on this planet, we do certain things where, we're manifesting something out of nothing. So my question would be, is that, do you think that the zero state and the zero dimension would be the consciousness that we are, right? The expression of that zero point and that zero state?
I think that everything manifests from that consciousness. There's a thing that's spoken of in many different cultures and traditions. The one that comes to mind for me is the Akashic record, the knowledge of everything that ever was or ever will be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that for us in the 3D state, I think life is like a river. And we just happen to dip our toe into that river at that specific point. But everything that it was and everything that will be is still in existence. It's just that we're visiting in this 3D way that point right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where our consciousness is focused. And I think if we take that foot out of that river and allow our consciousness and our vision to recognize the river is there, the river will be there, the river is here right now, but it all exists at the same time, we'll find the answers that we're looking for.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. I like that. I like that answer. And okay, so then the question really begets again is, consciousness had to have come from somewhere, and consciousness in itself would have formed out of nothing, right? So, would nothing be the ultimate state which we would want to be in order for us to, say, do ancestral healing, family healing, and manifestations of other kinds? Yeah.
I think that's the great question. I think that's the question that none of us will have the answer to in this physical dimension until we transition and transcend. I think that's the ultimate question. It's what came before the Big Bang? Which came first? Is there a universal consciousness that everything emanates from? My answer to that is yes. Absolutely. I believe that with my heart and soul, that there is a universal consciousness that everything manifests from. Somebody once said that this concept of the ultimate, the eye at the center of the universe projects this image, and that we're all part of that image, and that we're here. There's lessons to be learned right now. The ultimate lesson, I think, is the last lesson we learn when we do the transition. The last lesson in each incarnation that we learn, and I think between lives, I think we have a better insight into that situation. But I firmly believe in reincarnation. Not believe, I know it. I know reincarnation exists. I know I've been here before. I know that I'm an old soul because I recognize so many things in my life and lessons that keep recurring. And I think I'm just one of these people who learn their lessons in a very difficult way. That just, you
If I didn't do it the hard way, you wouldn't do it anyway at all. That's that's what I always say.
There you go. But as I shared with Rob earlier, I'm at a point in my life. I'm 69. I was 69 in January. That I've never felt more at peace. Not afraid of anything. If for some reason my life came to an end tomorrow, so be it. Not that I want that, but if it did, I don't have any problem with that. I am, maybe that's where I am, in that state of connection to almost to that 0 point consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, existence is right now is a joy and it's a blessing.
Yeah, and really that's what it's meant to be, right? When we plan on coming here, we set out this itinerary to which we need to carry out contracts and kind of what have you. And the experience that we came here to have, that's already set in place for future events to happen, which will direct us in certain directions in our lives, to which we'll pick up friends and we'll lose friends and pick up more friends and lose friends. And eventually that journey should be, concluded as peacefully and lovely as possible. And this is how it's supposed to be. But unfortunately, over the last few thousand years, it just hasn't been. But it's not always been the case, right? We've been a peaceful people for majority of our existence than we have been, warlike, like we have been for the last little while. I always say on my shows before I take off is that I agree with what you were saying earlier, to where the mind just can't be stopped. When people say I meditate and I can't meditate because I just have thoughts that just keep going and going and going. And really that's the case, because it's taken our body millions of years to evolve into this machine that it is to facilitate our consciousness, that nature, Mother Earth, has had mercy on us, because there's two forms of beings on this planet. There's the established form, and then there's the unestablished form, and nature has left us as unestablished. And by that I mean is that my cat doesn't want to be anything more than a cat. I give him food and he's happy, and that's it, and he's finished. He's content with being a cat. And nature has left us, probably by design, as unestablished, to the point where we've evolved physically to, the peak where we're going to be, but we are free to be more than what we are. We can, visualize, and we can imagine, and we can astral travel, and we can remote view, and we can lucid dream and clairs, like you were saying earlier. We have all those abilities within us, and that's really what we're here to explore, that physicality of what we can do and have fun with this body. The way I see it, I'm here on a holiday here on Earth because it's a beautiful planet. I love Star Trek, so I kind of see Earth as Risa, right? You here, come here, you have fun, you enjoy yourself, you be kind to others, and you do what you got, and then off you go. And maybe you'll come back, maybe you won't, maybe there'll be another Risa, or maybe there won't, but that's how I see life myself anyways. Well, thanks for this time. I appreciate it. And
wonderful to meet you and hear your point of view. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And I just want you to stick around one more second, Omar. And I want to touch on one more thing before we finish up here. And when a lot of what we're saying is when we live in love, right? And that love is a multifaceted, there's a multifaceted explanation for that word. Love can be appreciation. Love can be gratitude. Love can be empathy. Love can be looking at all these different things. So when we say love, it's so much more than just the affection of one to another. There's so much more awareness that goes into that word. And, like Victor said, if tomorrow was the last day, and even at 41 years old, if tomorrow was the last, so be it. It is what it is. And I'm here, and I've lived in this pocket of love for as long as I could, potentially stay. And I'm okay with that. but that's also contentment. That love means contentment and that gratitude for the experience that you've had. So there's we can take that word love and turn into a ton of different adjectives of what it means to be within that love. And I just wanted to throw that out there because I think that's such a fascinating perspective to see that love really work for everybody and really become something that they move forward, staying within.
I wrote a poem called Three Simple Gifts. Can I share that with you? I think that
Absolutely.
addresses exactly what you're talking about. It's called the 3 L's. Three simple gifts, the 3 L's. There are 3 simple gifts we may offer each other, priceless when shared with our sisters and brothers. Gifts from the heart that will serve us all well. And each of these starts with the 12th letter L. The first gift is listening without opining or word. Truly listening to and hearing those who need to be heard. Compassionate listening to someone that is near you and touching their soul by saying, I hear you. The second gift is looking with eyes of compassion, truly seeing our oneness in this human fashion, recognizing our unity in this world that we share, and using our eyes to show that we care. The third gift is loving, the most precious of all, opening our hearts and following love's call. First, loving within us, and then loving without. The finest gift loving, of this there's no doubt. And these gifts won't be found in market nor store, can't be bought for 100, 1,000, or more. They're endowed to us by the divine up above, the lesson to listen, to look, and to love.
Incredible. That was awesome. That
Thank
was
you.
awesome, Victor. And if you have any more poetry, I would, just break it out, brother, because it is just intense. And I love that spoken word aspect of it. It's just so it flows and it has so much meaning to me. So
Thank you. I do have the one that I shared. I do have the one that I shared during the Portal to Ascension. This one was inspired, as I said, my mom passed in January of 2020. And of course, with the onset of COVID, so many people lost so many. And of course, with the horrible situation right now that people are dying. But I wrote this poem based upon that experience with my mother's passing. And I think others will resonate with it. It's called Circles and Rings. The path of great beauty in so many things, from atoms to galaxies, circles and rings. Natural wisdom that dwells there within, from naught to 360, that magical spin. We circle each other in gravity's dance, as Gaia circles Sol, the solar romance, as Luna circles us in life-giving motion, drawing the tides and inner emotion. And the age of the oak is found in its rings, as in woman and man and all living things. And when the rings stop and life comes to an end, we'll all circle back and dance once again. Thank you.
I like that. I like that one. I like
that
them
was great.
both. Yeah, that was wonderful. Really resonate with that first one. It reminds me of my experience just a few weeks ago. I'm based out of Canada. Up here it gets pretty cold, and my wife and I, we were out walking around, and we picked up a case of beer and a pizza, and we were on our way home, and I saw this guy walking down the street, and I said, "Hey, what's up, man?" And he looked at me, and I looked at him, and he said, "I'm cold," and I was like, "Oh," and so I took off my 2 hoodies that I was wearing, and I gave them to him, and I gave him a hug, told him I understand, I love him, gave him a few beers, gave him half my pizza, and kept going home, and came home and drank my beer and ate my pizza and went to sleep peacefully. So it really resonated with that first poem, and not the first time I've done that, but that was a recent memory that got invoked there. I forgot about it actually until you mentioned it.
I'm glad it I'm sorry. I'm glad it brought back the memory. It's interesting. One of the things that I recognized in my studies, in my theological studies, was the story of Sodom and Gomorrah had nothing to do with sexual perversion. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah had to do with inhospitality. That's why the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed. You had these angels who appeared and would knock on doors and ask for a place to stay and a meal. And they were strangers in need of food and a roof over their heads for a night. And everyone turned them away except Lot and his family. Inhospitality, the greatest sin, turning away those in need, turning away those who are hungry, turning away those of our brothers and sisters who need to be taken care of and loved.
Amazing. It's so true. There's so much that we learn from those stories too that just become so they manifest into this tremendous lesson, and you can use those lessons to really guide your path. And I love any type of scripture. It doesn't matter what it is, any religion it comes from. I always try and find I'm very big into comparative mythology too. So I on two different levels I look at it. I look at it for the lesson that it's supposed to be teaching you. I look at it for the congruency of different characters that I've already read about to see where those connections are. So, I think it's just incredible when we dive past what the text actually says, and I think that's part of what when people look at the Bible, it's up for interpretation, and that's part of what people don't understand. Sometimes they take these stories too literally, and I think that kind of it hurts their perspective when they do that.
The basic message: love one another, take care of
That's
one
right.
another.
That's right.
Omar, I was wondering if we could send a box of Friskies over to Putin. Would we be able to do that?
He jumped out
Oh,
of
jumped
the
out.
he jumped out of the live because we're about to shut it down. So Victor, is there any last things that you'd like to say to the audience? I've loved having you on. I can't wait to do this again with you. We're going to set it up, in a couple of weeks. We're going to have you come back, and we'll do part 2. And we'll get into we'll try and figure out some topics so we can really just bounce back and forth with it. It's just so incredible to hear your story tonight. I loved it. And I love learning about people and hearing where they came from. So, finding out where you came from, it showed me a lot more of who you were and how relatively similar our journeys have been. Like I said, from the macro to the micro. And, I just appreciate you and love what you're doing. And I think it's incredible.
I wonder, honestly, if we were related in a previous life. I'm pretty sure we were.
I was thinking the same thing, but I didn't want to freak you out jumping out the window right off the bat. I swear, I was like, this guy's got to be my uncle. You're from New York, right? I'm from New York. I mean, we probably live about an hour and 15 minutes from each other. And it's just, it feels so familiar for me right now. And I'm just, I think it's incredible. Like, I love those types of connections. So you just made a friend of me. Well, you made a friend of me a while ago, but even more of a friend of me this evening, Victor. So, I appreciate you coming through and love what you're doing. And I'm going to help promote your shows and every avenue I get, because I think I was listening today and it's just so insightful, and I appreciate it. I really do.
Thank you. It's interesting that one of the things that I noticed, especially over the last 5 years doing the podcasts and participating in gatherings and things of this nature, is that every time I meet someone, I may be a stranger in this lifetime when we first meet. By the time it's over, I have a sense that I've known this person forever. And that's the way I feel about you.
I feel exactly the same way, and I don't get that with everybody. So it's a little bit more unique for me, but I absolutely feel it. And it's incredible, and I can't wait to explore it further and work further with you on it, and working together in these types of shows and putting things together. I think it's just going to be an incredible relationship from here on out, and we appreciate you. I know the audience was lighting up the not an audience, but the people who were listening to us were lighting up the chats as well. And in the description again, guys, you can go and follow Victor's show. We have that there. We have it also in the comments that are running up in the chat. And if any last words, Victor?
I'm grateful, Rob, for you having me on and allowing me to share a bit of my story. And I'll just share one more little thing. About 10 years ago, a friend in business came to me and said, how do you balance the fact that you have this day job in industrial sales and technical sales and so on, and this other stuff you do, the spiritual work you do? And very naturally, without even thinking about it, I said, the day job pays my salary. I said, the other work pays my soulary. And this word soulary came out of me. And the book that I'm writing is called Soulary, The Compensation of Spirit.
That's incredible. That's incredible. And one of the things you talked about earlier, too, was this ability to give to the universe and letting the universe give back to you in that monetary way to sort of, I've vested everything that I own into this and doing this. And I haven't, the payback isn't so much coming yet, but it doesn't matter to me. I'm not worried. I just love putting it out there. So in its divine timing, it will come, I hope. But even if it doesn't, I'm content with what I'm doing. But I put everything into this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, research. And I'm trying to put things together for a book myself. And it's just, I can't see myself doing anything else right now at all. At all. Even if I tried, I would be miserable, because this is what I love. And this is what I'm going to continue to do today, tomorrow, 10 years from now, the next lifetime, maybe the lifetime after that, who knows? But again, I want to say thank you, Victor. It's been absolutely incredible. And thank you to everybody who listened this evening. This has been Full Spectrum Universe. My name is Rob Yox. Thank you, Omar, for jumping in with your incredible question. And we will see you all on the flip side.